At the first opening of the City Nature Challenge and talk then. And I just happened to randomly ask last night if she would be able to come. And of course, less than 24 hours, she's able to come talk to us. So I'm really proud to have her here. And so I will get her to come up. This is Vicky Papuga.
Is this good? Or thank you for the intro, Steve. We good? Awesome. All right, well, I am sorry that I'm replacing your original speaker, but you have me now. So hi, good to meet all of you. Yeah, so I'm Vicky Papuga. I'm the Rights of Way Pollinator Habitat Coordinator from the Canadian Wildlife Federation. I work on our Rights of Way as Habitat program. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but what that means essentially is that we look to work with municipal managers, conservation authorities, other land managers to restore habitat in Rights of Way, which includes stuff like roadsides, hydro corridors, pipeline easements, trail sides, and all that kind of stuff. Essentially looking for those areas of potential habitat in places where they might not otherwise exist because they're constrained by stuff like development, urbanization, and stuff like that.
I get rid of some extra
Yeah,
things.
totally.
See a little less going on. All right, put that up there. Let's put you away. Okay.
Awesome. Do I just use the little arrow?
Yeah, if you just the arrow should be.
Awesome. Yeah, so I work on the Rights of Way as Habitat program, but I thought that today I really wanted to talk to all of you about our community science programs that are associated with Monarch, as I work kind of under this, I want to say umbrella, it's going to be funny in a second, but I work under the umbrella of Monarch program. No worries. I'm just like, I'm really worried. I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't fall down.
Probably make it a little better. And
there we go. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about our community science, the data that we collect and that we ask people like you to really help us collect, because we would love to be out there all the time, but unfortunately we can't clone ourselves yet. And so I'll be talking about our projects in iNaturalist and also with Survey 123 about how we use that kind of data for modeling, and then also how that feeds into our Rights of Way restoration program. So I'll cover a little bit about the Canadian Wildlife Federation. It's one of Canada's oldest environmental charities. It's been around for over 50 years. We have a lot of really cool programs. We're really based in the science, and our missions are essentially to conserve, educate, but also inspire other Canadians to also like conserve nature and wildlife. We've really built up over the years. Some cool programs that we have that I can think of off the top of my head. Over on the East Coast, for example, we have a program where they work with like local like fishing folk to use different gear that will not negatively affect marine mammals, for example. We have our education department that works with school teachers, providing them with like pollinator plants for pollinator gardens to help educate kids. There's the Canadian Conservation Corps, that's what it's called, I want to say, where it's a cohort of youth come together. They go on these really cool like adventures together, and then they also do their own community conservation projects. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. I fit in under terrestrial conservation. And yeah. So pollinator bus. This is one of my favorite graphics that we've come up with so far. So as you will see, the Monarch is in the front driving the bus with a little umbrella over them, but they've got a whole bunch of cool passengers with them. So I'm here to talk about Monarch and collecting Monarch data, but in reality, in restoration for Monarch, we're restoring habitat for a whole bunch of other species, including a whole whack ton of pollinators. So the Monarch, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term umbrella species. Hands, anybody know what that means? There we go. Good, I can explain it, and like not too many people know. That's awesome. So the Monarch is kind of like charismatic umbrella species, which means that it kind of literally forms an umbrella when you think about its habitat needs and feeding needs, in terms of the fact that if you conserve habitat for Monarch, restore habitat, enhance habitat for Monarch, those needs capture the needs of a whole bunch of other pollinators. And because the Monarch is so charismatic and people love Monarch. A lot of people have such personal stories with it. People can connect to that mission, and by connecting through that mission, they can then it's like it's extending the good essentially. So the Monarch might be driving the bus, but there are beetles, there are hoverflies, flower flies, there are bees, bumblebees, wasps, and moths that all get to come along for the ride and get more habitat in the process. So as you can probably tell by my earrings, I'm here to talk about Monarch, as I've already said, but that's because it's kind of like the shining star of our program because of the whole umbrella charismatic thing. So this map over here shows, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the migration of Monarch and the fact that it'll travel around 4,000 kilometers one way between its wintering habitat down in Mexico and then the most northern range that we are kind of privileged to host here. If you take a look at that map, you can see the line of the northern range of Monarch. And we in Ontario host probably one of the biggest like populations of the eastern monarch. Their range does extend further east and a bit west of us, but none of those areas have the same like density of monarchs that come through. I just want you to take note when you're looking at this map at the fact that it's at like a continental scale. So although we can see the general kind of migration patterns here, we can't exactly see the little nuances, especially in Ontario, where they're traveling to, what the patterns are. And so that's kind of partially where we come in. So a little bit more about our role in monarch recovery. So as of December 8th, 2023, very recently, the monarch was listed endangered under our Federal Species at Risk Act, which is good and bad news. I mean, obviously bad news because it's endangered. We don't want them to be endangered, but good news in that it means that there can be stuff now happening and further protections. For the monarch, of course, right now that'll only be on federal lands, but we're hoping that this kind of spurs more momentum as well. And as Chip Taylor from Monarch Watch, a really big name in like the monarch community, said, it is only from Ontario that a sufficient number of monarchs get to Mexico to continue the population. So we honestly have a really big responsibility here in Ontario to make sure that they have the habitat both for feeding, breeding, and then, you know, to make that journey southward again. So I'm really happy that iNaturalist was mentioned, as our iNaturalist project is something that I'm hoping people can join, or at least think about joining. And it's where we have gotten a lot of the data that we need. Helpthemonarchs.ca is a webpage where you'll see like a bunch of tabs on the side too that kind of talk about our monarch programs, the rights of way restoration programs, and it'll give you like a whole bunch of info and also some things about like what to do to like make areas more pollinator friendly. So when I'm talking about monarch conservation and using iNaturalist and also Survey 123, we are using community science data, and it's a scientific project, which means we need some research questions. These are kind of these overarching questions behind what we're trying to find with Monarch, but they're not all encompassing, but they do lead the research. So one question is what factors, whether those are, you know, landscape, weather, influence monarch roost size, and I can't say this word, so I'm not going to say it, but basically influence like where they're traveling through, how much time they spend somewhere. And then question 2 is what are the main migration routes of monarchs in Ontario? So how do we even try to start answering these questions? One, iNaturalist. So we have a project in iNaturalist that is called Monarch Migration in Ontario. I would love for people to join, encourage others to join. As Sue was saying, iNaturalist has become a really big thing in the scientific community. We genuinely rely on the data from there to help us get a bigger picture of what is happening because again, we can't go out and we can't get this data, especially for a migratory species like monarch that makes a trek a lot of people aren't gonna make. So yeah. Can I play a video? Will that work? If it's embedded? Okay, cool. So this is just gonna be, it's a tutorial for specifically the iNaturalist project that we run for how to join it and also kind of the stuff that we look for in terms of information to input into it. As a note, it might refer to the program that we have as the Monarch Ambassador Program. That is an old name that we are currently, I guess, workshopping away from. We're gonna actually be calling the program, I think it's Kaleidoscope Monarch Program. I don't know how many of you know, a group of monarchs is called a kaleidoscope. So It's a cute name. Alrighty. There should be sound though. I mean, I don't think you really need the sound. It's just kind of background music. It's more about reading. It should be okay. Yeah, so this is just kind of showing like the first like sign up of the account and everything, like how you get on iNaturalist. These videos are also like available on YouTube. Canadian Wildlife Federation has a few different like sub channels on there. The Rights of Way program has a sub channel. We have a few channels for like iNaturalist from our education department. It's fine. It's just like background music. Just silently watch the video. Yeah. It just kind of shows the steps of how to do it. Just, so it starts percolating in your brains a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, so with this project and also with our Survey 123 project, what we're really also looking for is roof sightings. And so we ask people go out or like make observations kind of near the end of August into September that's when they really start migrating south to Mexico for their overwintering grounds down there. So we ask that people, when you're out and about, on a walk, going to meet somebody, just keep an eye out. If you see a monarch, take a picture, kind of note, it'll know the location for you. We want to know a few some more information about it, kind of like what the weather is, kind of where you saw it, how many you saw, what kind of behavior it was displaying. And this one is pretty easy. Like we would love it if you wanted to go out and hunt for some roosts, but like it's also the ease of iNaturalist is that it can happen with your phone in your pocket when you're just out on a walk or something. Like it's not arduous by any means. So this is just showing more of the information that we asked for with the project. Cool. Awesome. Oh yeah, with iNaturalist, you can also either take a photo within the app, which is a little easier a lot of the time because it'll automatically like geolocate it for you if you have your location on. If you take a photo with your camera and upload it, you'll just have to kind of know the location yourself. Yeah. And then, yeah, the key part is that you want to add it to that project. And then just kind of insert those different values in there. If you have like signed up for the project already in iNaturalist, whenever you make an observation and you click add project at the bottom, it'll come up. So, and then like this kind of screen will pop up for you. Yeah. So again, I'm gonna keep reiterating that this data is super important, and I'll show you a bit why, and how we have, if I can make it go to the next slide. There we go, okay. All right, so this is older modeling data that our awesome GIS analyst Vincent put together, but I wanted to go through it because it still shows how we use this kind of data and how it helps inform our work. So I'm going to show you a series of modeling of monarch migration when it's coming northward again into Ontario. So this year, I know we have had sightings at Point Pelee, and I think we've had some outlier sightings like a bit further north. So they're in Ontario, they're making their way up. So in this map, what you can see is, so those blue dots are sightings of monarch, and you can see kind of the clustering of where they are. And that orange area is kind of like the range of where they're currently up, like the northernmost range of where they have currently like migrated to as of mid-April. So things to point out is that you can see those outlier dots up there. And when we do modeling and when we do analysis of this kind of data, we have to be careful to not include that stuff, as we are looking more to kind of average out where the bulk of monarchs are coming up. as opposed to the outliers. So like the outliers in this instance, one of them was a deceased monarch. The other one was a captively raised monarch that were still submitted, which is fine. But it also means that with our data, we have to be careful because what informs our data is not like the outliers, but when the majority of monarchs are coming. So like mid-April and then early May, you can see a lot more of them have started making their way up. And then week 19, this is about when most of them have made it to Ontario. Over the next, like the bulk of them have kind of made it to Ontario into this range. Over the next few weeks afterwards, they'll kind of extend out eastwards all the way into Nova Scotia. But again, we have like the most like the biggest concentration of them. And so part of the reason that we make sure we don't kind of count those outliers as much, and I'll like show you the maps in a few slides, is that we use this to inform stuff like, for example, our mowing map. So in the program I work in, Rights of Way Restoration, we work with like municipal land managers, for example, and we try to get them to adjust their practices to kind of like help encourage there to be growth of habitat, even if they don't want to like actively seed it or plant it because it might be a lot of money or it might be too much work on top of the workload they already have. So this kind of stuff, this is the mowing map. Good, it was the next slide. So this mowing map is something that was developed by us using that data. So the community science data that was collected and then averaged and then analyzed to determine when the bulk of monarchs gets to a certain point, and then when the bulk of monarchs seems to leave from Ontario to do that southward migration. And what this helps us in our restoration work is to determine what period of time should the habitat be mowed up until like when is the period of time that is like a critical breeding period for the monarch, and during that time we don't want to mow if we can avoid it. And then after that critical breeding time, there is again an opportunity to mow. So this is one way to kind of just illustrate how we use that data, and it's really important because part of the like monarch decline has happened because of their stuff like habitat conversion, overuse of pesticides, urbanization that has kind of taken away their habitat. But another part of it is a lack of availability of habitat, oftentimes due to like mowing grass and not wanting to have any sort of other aesthetic, right? So with municipalities, for example, they have to maintain also to a safety sightline standard. So we try to work with managers essentially being like, okay, when is like the earliest time for you to mow and the latest time for you to mow? When can we ensure that there's like that space for pollinators for what they need to grow? And how can we kind of compromise so that it works for all of us? It can be hard, but we try. And the data like this kind of data really, really helps us. Vincent, I think, is working on an updated map because if you look, for example, Southern Ontario, the before mow date is May 1st. Nobody is mowing before May 1st anyway, so it doesn't exactly work into the benefits of Monarch. If we say, oh yeah, don't mow after May 1st, they're like, we have to mow. So it's a work in progress. Yeah, so this is just another thing I wanted to show to kind of illustrate the power of community science. So this was a paper that was co-written by Vincent, our analyst, and it was using data on the left from ECCC, so Environment and Climate Change Canada, in targeted surveys on lake shores of monarch roosts. So monarch roosts are the clusters of butterflies that you'll see in trees when they're migrating southward to Mexico. They're diurnal migrants, so they migrate during the day, and then for the evening, they rest in the trees altogether. It's really beautiful if you ever get to see it, but it's also really helpful to know where that's happening because you want to provide them with nectaring habitat around those trees. On the right, you can see that some of those dots really align well with the map on the left. But on the right as well, you have more information towards like the middle portion there between the lakes. And that map was informed by community science. It was eButterfly, Mission Monarch, and then iNaturalist data that showed us those roosts, like the additional roosts that weren't just on the targeted lakeshore surveys. So again, community science really helps out because we only have so much time to do studies. And this kind of stuff informs us that there are roosts away from the lakeshore. Like we expected the lakeshore, but yeah, very important. Just the variables that were covered were land cover, distance to water slope aspect, which is important when looking at this kind of stuff. It's just more from that same study. So distance to Great Lakes did play a pretty big part in how often like they would find a roost. Another thing was goldenrod cover. So goldenrod is one of the main nectaring sources in late fall, along with asters. And so again, they need a lot of nectaring habitat around their roosts, and especially like late fall, like late summer and fall kind of nectaring sources. All right, so we're going back to those questions that we haven't talked about in a while. Question 2, so what are the main migration routes of monarchs in Ontario? This is kind of like a larger like provincial map. So we have a decent idea that the Great Lakes is like almost these funneling barriers to them, which is why we find roosts on the edges of the Great Lakes a lot, because they can travel, I think it's like 100 kilometers or more a day. But they won't cross water at night because they're first off, they're sleeping at night. They're in these trees, but also it seems that they often stop on the lake shore to kind of like rest overnight and wait for either better weather or wait for like a better opportunity to cross, which is pretty cool. So Survey 123 is another kind of it's a project separate from iNaturalist, and the reason that we have Survey 123 is because this one is for point counts. I have the instructions here. Feel free to scan that QR code. It'll take you to the link that I have at step 2. I just want to explain why we use Survey 123 alongside iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is fantastic because it gives you the opportunity to take pictures, put your observations in. What it doesn't do, what is a gap, is that it doesn't let you input absences, which when you are looking at a species and you're trying to figure out where it is also important, just as important to know as where they are, which I'm sure many of you understand and know that. So Survey 123 requires that you do a point count. So it's a little more purposeful, I would say, than iNaturalist. The survey, basically what you do is you want to be in one spot. Actually, I don't remember. I'll have to reread the instructions because you might not have to be in one spot, but I think you have to generally be in the same area for minimum 5 minutes. You don't want any big like trees or big buildings or anything obstructing your view within like 50 meters, or 50 meters and at 50% of your kind of like field of view. And you stand there, maybe you're waiting for the bus, maybe you're waiting for a friend to come pick you up, and you observe to see if any monarchs pass you by. And that's it. That's the point count. And if after 5 or 10 minutes, your bus comes, you're like, I didn't see any monarchs, we want you to log that there were no monarchs, because that, again, it gives us really important data that at that point in time in that area, we did not have monarchs. But again, the timing for this would also kind of align with the iNaturalist because we are looking for that migratory route. So that is late August into September. So I'm almost done. I'm sorry if I'm running over time a little bit. So I'm gonna transition a bit to talk about rights of way as pollinator habitat, which I covered a bit at the beginning, as this is the program that I mainly work on. So in Canada, we have about 1 million kilometer of roads. That's actually might be more. I think they're slightly outdated. So we have probably over 1 million kilometer of roads at this point, 232,000 kilometers of hydro lines, and 117,000 kilometers of pipelines, which makes for 15,130 kilometers square of available habitat, which is, I would say that's a pretty good amount. And this is a graphic that we have that was created by like Pollinator Partnership Canada. And I just wanted to show it because it really shows the different opportunities for roadside enhancements, as they call it, for pollinator habitat. While you're looking at this and kind of looking around at it, it's a pretty graphic. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the different types of restoration that we do. So the two kind of broad types are passive and active restoration. The names might kind of give it away. Passive restoration is essentially letting an area naturalize. So we'll work with land managers and we're like, okay, can you lower the amount of mowing that you're doing per year from like 4 cycles of mowing down to maybe 1 cycle of mowing at this time of year, and just kind of let it grow and see what comes in. In Southern Ontario, we tend to see problems with this approach, just due to the fact that like our seed bank is pretty depleted in some areas, especially in like the much further south areas. I'm sure you've seen all the Phragmites everywhere, but we have a lot of invasive species pressure. So if you try to passively restore something like a roadside, what's probably coming in is some Phragmites or something else, right? It's not our native species. It's something we want to try and encourage, but it's usually what we try to do alongside kind of other methods. So I work a lot with partners on active restoration, which means stuff like going in and tilling a roadside, and then maybe tilling it another few times, maybe putting in a nurse crop to kind of help the soil build up a little bit, and then seeding it, planting it, rolling the seeds into the dirt, and watching for something to grow. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't require a lot of it requires upfront a lot of management, but over time we have found that it lowers maintenance costs. So that's one way to sell it. And the other way to sell it is also that they're going to be seeing some beautiful habitat. They'll likely see monarchs and lots of other pollinators, which is often good for PR. So there's a lot of ways to kind of get to it, but it's a really good opportunity. Hydro corridors along like natural gas pipelines and solar farms are another really great spot for restoration. Again, if you think about hydro corridors, especially, they offer these like long like swaths of habitat. They have to be maintained anyways for the infrastructure. They can't have woody species. You know what's perfect? Meadow pollinator habitat. It doesn't have woody species. It's relatively short. It doesn't need as much maintenance as like grass or woody species. It's ideal. And so we've worked with like Hydro One, and we've worked with other partners as well that have like land leases with them to restore hydro corridor habitat. And going back to the community science, what that really helps us with is being able to target restoration efforts where it's needed, right? Because I don't know how much y'all know, but conservation funding is hard to come by. It can be really difficult in the space to get all the funding like that we would want to restore all the habitat that we would want. We keep trying, but while we're trying to do that, we do have to target efforts. And what helps with that community science, it not only helps us understand larger population trends and kind of like movement trends, but it also helps inform us what the best way to help the monarch and other pollinators is. This is just like one part of our rights of way as habitat program that I just wanted to highlight. It's another kind of mapping application. This came from ideas of kind of looking at where restoration was happening and then also kind of comparing that to like what we know of migratory like monarch pathways. It's also a way to communicate restoration by municipalities. Lanark County was one of our first kind of like big partners in this program, and they've done a lot of roadside restoration. It's pretty cool. And it's just kind of, it's an example also of partnership, as I think that community science is partnership with other scientists, with other members of your community, and we work like through partnerships. So we work with land managers, we work with community scientists, community orgs. I think of it as this like really big, cool ecosystem that is also pretty complex, but that ultimately benefits the like natural ecosystems that we're really trying to help restore and enhance. So that's it. Thank you for listening. The QR code that is on screen will just lead you to our link tree for our Rights of Ways Habitat group. I didn't discuss it as much just because the community science stuff is a bit more relevant right now. But that Rights of Ways Habitat group, it'll kind of give you a list of the different groups that we have. We have something called Communities of Practice, where we have Eastern Ontario, we have the GTHA, and then we have Southwestern Ontario groups of land managers that we bring together to kind of talk with each other about their restoration projects, what has been challenging, what has been successful, and to kind of discuss that and work out best management practices. But we also host a really fun winter webinar series. And if you sign up for what is it called? It's like our Canadian-wide network. You'll get like emails and stuff about those webinars. This past winter, it was about prescribed burns as part of meadow restoration and site preparation. We talked about that dashboard that I showed. That's like a way to communicate restoration, track restoration. And then we also had a guest speaker from who worked on the Meadowway and talked about bee and plant interactions in like an urban meadow setting. So those are my plugs. And if there are any questions, I'm here. So yeah.
For the roosting tree, is there a specific kind of tree they're looking for, or is it a species, is the profile, do you have
So I was asked if there's any, yeah. So I was asked about roosting trees, whether there are any specific species to look for or like profile of trees. I'm not super. So I know that down in Mexico, it's coniferous fir forest that they like really, that's where they spend their winters. Here, we have seen them in a few different types of trees. Like we've seen them in oaks, we've seen them in maples, we've seen them in like cedars. So it doesn't seem to be necessarily a specific tree type. I'm sure that there is a specific one that I'm not thinking of right now, but it tends to be, I think, more importantly is what in the landscape is kind of funneling them. So it tends to be like by water, is like a thing. Like for example, we're looking to do some point counts like in this upcoming fall, up by Lake Simcoe, because it's not a Great Lake, but we have seen some evidence that they're still using that shoreline. So it's stuff like that. It's like around water, they tend to kind of cluster. And also if it's like an area that has trees and then nectaring sources, that's a very huge deal to the monarch. So if there's like a lot of like goldenrod asters and stuff like that and trees nearby, those would be kind of what they would prefer. Yeah. Okay, I saw your hand first and then we'll go to you. Is that okay?
First a comment. I think that automobiles are one of the largest predators of migrating monarchs. I have to say, as a scientist, I don't have data to substantiate that except personal experience. But during the migration, when I drive, say, from Peterborough to Ottawa to visit relatives, I can kill a number of monarchs just in one way. So it interests me that you're promoting the production of habitat adjacent to highways. And I'm wondering if you'd comment on that. Are we not predisposing a greater number of these animals to stop close to highways during migration?
That's a good question. I'll try and summarize and repeat that. So there was a comment about the kind of the role of cars in the mortality of monarchs and other species as well. And there's the concern that if you are promoting the restoration of habitat on like roadsides, will that not negatively affect them when they are migrating? Which is a very good point. That is, I can tell you we've had a lot of discussions about it. There's a lot of discussions in like the monarch science and restoration community about that. So in our program, we do have specific kinds of roadsides that we will and will not partner on. So like bigger highways and stuff, we usually won't. We prioritize lower speed, lower volume if we can. And then also ones that have like adjacent, maybe like habitat, like whether that's woods or something, because those have shown in the research to be a net benefit. That kind of habitat, where we will not restore like medians and stuff like that too. With something that promotes a monarch or other pollinator to travel like from across live lanes of traffic and stop and then across another live lane of traffic. Because yeah, that is a concern, but the research has shown that if you kind of prioritize low volume, low speed, that kind, like the more rural roads, if you can, there's a net benefit to pollinators and monarch versus like the mortality rate. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the question was, can we contact golf courses about creating suitable habitat? We actually have a project. I'm trying to remember where. I think it's over closer to Ottawa, or it's one of our regions where we have projects right now is actually working with a golf course to promote and to create some patches of restored habitat. So the answer is yes, we do work with them. It can be a bit difficult just because of, aesthetics and stuff, and also trying to coordinate if they're using specific like pesticides. But we are definitely more than willing to work with them, and we've also, I think, been in talks to restore like old golf courses too and stuff like that.
You approach the golf courses?
So it depends on the fund. So everything is about funding. Because we are in like a registered charity, we have to we have government funding and everything like that, but we basically have very strict requirements for each funding. So for I think the funding stream in like southwestern Ontario, they maybe can, but we would approach them if we can within our funding stream. Like we're not against approaching them. We want to, especially because as I'm pretty sure your question implies, we have also realized that they could be a really great area for habitat, but it just depends on if we're able to within like the funding stream that we're working with. Yeah. You.
In regards to urban green spaces, yeah, you mentioned schoolyards, I believe. Do you actively sort of contact or work with schoolyards and urban park municipalities, parkland, and even churchyards sometimes have a lot of garden and green space?
That was a good question. So the question was asking if we approach because mentioning that like schoolyards and stuff like that have a lot that they could have like habitat, and also if we approach like municipalities or even like churches. That's a good idea. I haven't thought of the churches one. So the school yard answer one is actually a different program within Canadian Wildlife Federation. That is the education. I think it's education that hosts them, and they specifically work with teachers. So those are the ones who both provide teachers with pollinator plants, and also help with planning lesson plans around that and kind of like encouraging green education. We do approach like municipalities, including in urban spaces. Since I'm responsible for the GTHA, I work in a very, very urbanized space. I am working with municipalities within like the GTHA, and also like conservation authorities, some community organizations. So we very much reach out to those people. I haven't reached out to churches, and that's now on my list to talk to my colleagues about. It'll be like, hey, what do we think about this? So thank you for that.
That was what I was thinking.
Yeah. There was a comment, what about cemeteries? Why cut the grass? Very, very good point. There's actually, I know, I've seen it in Ottawa and I've seen it in some parts of Canada. There's a movement for something called green burials, not CWF related, but like this is an interest of mine, where it's basically not embalming, and it's like burying in simple caskets that, will decompose, and will become part of the environment. And those are kinds of the spaces I can think of would actually maybe be really good partners. If we could find some of those cemeteries as like more and more people maybe become more accepting of that. And I see that as like a future kind of opportunity. So it's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
There is one located in Southern Ontario, I think, somewhere. So I watched a documentary at the film festival called Will for the Woods. About a guy who was buried in just like a pine casket in the woods. And it mentioned this green burial association that there's a few prairies in Ontario that do where you can be selected cemetery, like natural cemetery.
Yeah, it's definitely something to explore. It's right now, again, it's funding, and like what we can do according to funders. So like our program is very much focused on rights of way, but maybe the cemetery is close enough to a road. So
Slope there along, the Ashburnham where the slope. Lip blocks. They cut down all those big trees. Yeah. And it's all crappy weeds right now. It looks like that, but.
yeah, there was a comment about like a slope over in Ashburnham by the locks, which I have also seen. That's kind of just like a mess of cut down vegetation and stuff. I do know that because it depends on who owns the land. I was about to say, so I was gonna mention that because of the fact that Monarch is now listed as endangered federally. It means that Parks Canada is gonna have to account for that on their lands, and they're going to have to put together plans for like multi-species action plans and everything like that. And I have been in some contact with Parks Canada for the Trans-Severn Waterway, so we'll see. Yeah.
So on your graphic of the migration, you showed them coming down through, basically going down through. Going around the other side of the lake down. No data or?
Let me see. Talking about like the big continental one? Or this one? Or the other one?
They come all the way over to sequester?
It seems like they must follow along like the shoreline possibly, because I mean, it's also possible they're kind of like hopping maybe over some of the shorelines over there, but we're not sure. So was this the map that you were talking about?
Well, it was more the close-up one,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think that shows.
Maybe I think I know which one you're talking about. But this one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. We don't know. We could use more data. Yeah. Yeah, so there was just a question asking about whether there's kind of like monarchs maybe going around like kind of in the like around in the Cornwall, in those areas. And this is a good point about the fact that we need more data. So submit observations if you see them, because we have some idea of how some of them move. But a lot of it has been focused, like a lot of the research right now has been focused on the Great Lakes shorelines, which is fair because again, we know that those kind of act as like a funneling kind of barrier, but more data is good.
Big thing where this data is all Canadian. Referring to American, anybody in New York.
That's a good question. So it was asked, so all this data that we're talking about, like the iNaturalist project and everything, we're talking about Canadian and we're talking about specifically Ontario in this case. And I was asked whether there is anything like happening like in New York on the American side, and the answer is yes. This is just simply the project that's specific to Ontario, but because we are collecting data on Ontario right now, but also we pull, like when we do like the bigger modeling, that's like more like cross administrative boundaries that butterflies don't care about. We pull data from also like those, you can pull from the US projects as well and combine it with the Canadian data. And it is happening. There was a lot in the States. If you look it up, there are a lot of projects down there tracking the monarchs all throughout the different states, both the Eastern population and like the Western population west of the Rockies and stuff. So yeah.
Just imagine if the monarchs fly north, south side of the, oh, I'm an American, you have to go along this side.
Yeah, they don't get it. They don't understand jurisdiction, which is fine. Yep.
How the monarch populations west of the Rockies are doing.
So got a question about how monarchs west of the Rockies are doing. That was brought up earlier in a meeting yesterday. This week has been long. And apparently they're not doing well. Those ones apparently are seeing a really bad year I'm not sure if they know why yet, but they have like they have like the overwintering populations over there, and they've seemed to decline. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but it doesn't seem to be a great year for them either. So.
Are they worse off than?
I don't know if anybody has done comparisons yet. Yeah, so that might be something like later in the year that'll come out. Yeah.
Either comment on or explain just about the biology of them. I tend to think they all fly down and then they all fly back, but actually there's multi-generational.
Yeah.
And is that only on the way north or is it also on the way south?
That's a fantastic question. I forgot to cover monarch biology. I meant to, but I just kind of kept going. So the question was if I could cover a bit about monarch biology and about the generations that travel both northward and kind of southward. So no, you are correct in that there are multiple generations that make their way up north from the Mexico like forests that they overwinter in. It might be, I think you were right in saying it was about like maybe 4 generations. Don't quote me on that, might be wrong on that one. But so then they come up into Ontario, and there will also be maybe a few generations that live in Ontario and breed. Fun fact, as we all know, caterpillars. So while the monarch, like the adult monarch, is generalist and can feed on a bunch of different plants, we all know they have a very special relationship with milkweed they've co-evolved with. So their caterpillars will only eat milkweed. So they need milkweed up here. And that's because part of that too is that monarch and milkweed have co-evolved. So their caterpillars, milkweed is kind of toxic. So the caterpillars will eat that, and the toxin essentially helps protect them from being eaten. So it's a cool relationship. But you were right in that. So the generation that migrates down south is called the super generation, because it might actually be a single generation that goes like 4,000 kilometers from Canada down into Mexico and then overwinters.
They come partly back next spring.
Yeah, so it's not fully understood. That's like there have been some that have been tracked, as you're saying, that maybe come back a bit partially up in spring. Like it's expected because they don't really like breed down there. They start breeding when they come back up. So it is expected that like at least part of them do come back up, and then they kind of like start doing like that hop northwards, generation to generation. Oh yeah, on the back table, yeah, Steve just mentioned, on the back table, there are a few like brochures and stuff that I brought that are part of like our Monarch program and like Rights of Way restoration program. You are free to take any of them. We do make some pretty graphics, if I do say so myself. A lot of our stuff is very pretty, so that's it. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Awesome. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for filling in on such short notice, but we should have had you here for the entire evening. Small token of our appreciation. Thank you. Just one little Monarch story I have. Griffin's Greenhouses sells native plants, including native milk, the swamp milkweeds. And last summer, near the end of the summer, the staff started finding caterpillars on the milkweeds. So the owners cordoned off that area with tape and let the milkweeds consume half of the stock. And most of the staff had never seen the metamorphosis take place. So they were just glued every day. How are the caterpillars doing? And then of course, when they turned into chrysalises, everyone's watching. And there was practically a contest to see who could guess when they'd start to hatch. But I was there when the final one flew off over the greenhouse and headed south. So it was a great experience for all those people. So, so next, Sandy Garvey, one of our board members, has kindly agreed to show some of her photos on short notice as well. So I'll get Sandy to come up. Yep. Yeah, please. Slideshow.
And we got animations, nice. Okay, I'll just get rid of this. So you can get here.
What do I have to do? Just because it's supposed to start soon.
Oh.
It's supposed to pick up music. So I have
Yeah, I don't know if the music.
when I just started it right at the beginning. Just need to go up to the menu. The slideshow. So if you put me here, and then I start, and then I just have to do from the beginning. It should be. Okay. Do I have to look at anything? Good evening, everyone. As it was mentioned earlier, this is on very short notice. I have put together a lot of stuff. I'm not going to speak to you a lot because it's a lot of research for me because I'm not as familiar with a lot of views on the bird watch and whatnot. So basically, the one thing that I love about this group is the fact of the outings. I encourage anybody that can go to go. A lot of the outings are not as strenuous doings. It's not, you know, hill and vale and all over the place, but this here is a collection of just things that I have taken pictures of since January to last week. Some of them are just taken from my car because I'll just, when I'm bored, throw the dog in the car and go for a ride.
A lot of it is local trails. I've taken the time to try to identify as best I can, but please note I'm only as good as my best friends and I naturalist, and a lot of them are in debate. So basically I put the best I can together. I try to get out as much as I can, but even if you're doing a walk, it's amazing if you have your phone out or whatever that you can see. So I hope you enjoy, because I'm not going to be speaking at you anymore. Okay. Do I just? Where's I just with the? Oh, I just messed it up. Can you do it for me? I can't see it up here.
That's okay, it's a tiny little mess, okay. Just say, good.
Let's work with the rabbit mouse. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
it's on. Okay.
okay. It's supposed to have music. Because it played it the last time. Just one sec, we're just having technical difficulties. It didn't stay on. Should start at this first. If not,
Did that pause it?
put on mute then.
No.
From beginning, and it should have the music. Okay, just go back to the beginning. Okay, I guess rather than have me sing, you're gonna get a song version. I could hum, but if you just wanna go, yeah, back, just start it over from the beginning.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. Okay.
So to the slideshow, and they just hit
Yeah.
it here, first slideshow. At the top there. And then just go from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, start from the, keeps going back to that. Can you start it over again from the beginning?
So that was the beginning where it was showing. Because your screen sharing is paused. Not. What, it did this before. Do this.
So that's the, you know, it's not on screen.
That it? Now it's not going back to.
Mara, do you know how to get us back to the beginning? And then we'll just let it go. It's going into the middle of it.
Give it a try.
Thank you.
So I exited out of it because we did that before and it was almost like there were two versions. Yeah. Yeah, let's see, there's two views on. Let's see. From the beginning. She's really determined. Okay, PowerPoint. Let's just. Oops. Yeah. PowerPoint. PowerPoint is just really determined. Yeah. Try this screen. This guy. I'll get rid of this and we can see. And we can see your little captions.
It's not moving along. It's not moving along. That talking presenter on there.
Swirling. If they smother the lip. I look like a coyote.
Want me to sing? Did you tap? Huh? Did you tap?
No, not the right shoe.
So I just wanna.
It's almost 9 o'clock, and I have some photos as well, but it's a bit late and I didn't have a chance to fancy them up either. However, there are a couple of videos I do want to share. One is from several summers ago when I was out working in my yard and a family of wrens was in the yard as well. And there were 4 youngsters who were able to fly, but were starving and didn't stop chattering at the parents the entire time I was working in my yard. And one of them got really brave when I took a break and went up on my deck, and I'll show you the slide, which just so that's the preamble.
You don't have, okay, yeah. Okay. Where are you?
Where's Tamara? You know where mine is.
Just back in the folder.
Go to photos. All right, See if I can make this
Oh,
work.
are you just showing all these pictures?
No, I'm
No,
not.
okay.
I just have to, can you make that big? I'm gonna put on those ones, things. Okay, there's just a couple. So I'll go.
Are
from there.
those the videos there?
No, I will show there's more. Go down. Oh, here we are. This one first and with volume.
But we're not getting volume for some reason. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you won't hear what I heard then.
Yeah. One pause.
So I'm sitting maybe 5 feet away from this wren, and it is just, as you can see, it's just chirping away.
Is that working?
Yeah, just like that. Oh yeah, it just carried on and on and on. And then if that wasn't enough, I'm sitting at the table with my tools beside, went away. So where's my stuff? This isn't where I want to show another picture. Yes. Okay, this one.
Is this a video again?
Yep.
Okay. Let's get it.
So it comes right over to the table and it's sitting on my pruners. It's this far away from me. Yeah, there were 4 that the parents were trying to keep up with. Okay, so then the other one I wanted to share is from an experience in Algonquin Park. I've been camping at Pog Lake for quite a few years now, and from Pog you can access let's throw that up while I'm talking. Traffic jam in Algonquin Park. The mother crossed the road just immediately before this one, but there's always a crowd of people whenever there's an animal sighting like that. So back to, on this rail trail, very close to where I was that day, there's a little bridge and a creek that goes in underneath into a big pond. Do this one first. And a beaver swam underneath the bridge. The beaver's that one? Yeah, that one. Sorry, I forgot about. Sorry, I forgot about the mic. So this was the first one. Can you reverse it? Yeah, so he's swimming along, suddenly notices me and slaps his tail and scoots off underneath the bridge. Then right after that happened, I looked up the pathway of the creek into Whitefish Lake, and there's another one coming along. So close that one. Oops. Glad you're beside, and the next one, probably its mate, came along. And I filmed it coming all the way along, but then just at the very end, it notices me and off it went in underneath the bridge. But it's kind of late for me to go into all these slides. It's 9 o'clock now. So maybe I'll show them at Christmas. Some of them were teases for an outing that Lou Smirlis is doing on the Saturday of the long weekend at Warsaw Caves Conservation Area. There are a lot of great spring ephemerals there, and we'll be there. They bloom later than somewhere like Burnham or Fleming Forest or those kinds of places, because it's mostly a cedar forest, but there's a lot of ephemerals along the edge of the road, so it's a good spot to go for wildflowers. So thanks for everyone coming out, and thank you, especially Vicky and Sandy, for filling in at such short notice. And we'll see you in June.